All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at. Michael Didier here. Today we're going to talk about clean foods. You know, of all the people that come to my website, the blog that brings them there is this one here on clean foods. Here it is right here. Clean and unclean foods. What shall we eat? You know, if you go, I don't know, if you watch movies, if you read books, you are always going to see, and I think this happens to go along with the publishers of those books and who owns them, you're always going to see unclean things promoted. Bacon for breakfast, clams and oysters and lobsters, all the unclean foods that we're not supposed to eat. Those are the things that are being thrown at us by the world. I think that if it wasn't for those promotions, that we would have a lot less people eating pork. But I'm encouraged. I mean, here's my little blog. I'm encouraged that is the entry point for people who are coming to see my work for the first time. They're interested in eating clean, or at least finding out what it's about. Clean fish is probably next to clean foods. Clean fish is the thing that they go to the most because they're probably at a restaurant looking at, is this a clean fish? Bless them for being willing to learn what's important to Yehovah. We're going through Leviticus 11 today. We're going to see this again. I think, what was it? Commentaries, TSK. Oh, I guess I don't know for sure. Seemed like there was another chapter in Numbers, perhaps, that talks about clean food. I don't remember right now. But let's start. It says, now Yehovah spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, speak to, look what it says, Israel's seed. It doesn't say speak to America or the Americans or the U.S. citizens. Speak to the people of France, the South Africans, the Chinese. No, speak to Israel's seed. As you know, if you've known me and listened to me at all, when I talk about Israel's seed, we're talking about Ezra men. Leviticus 11, for those who are really interested in eating clean, will lead you to Leviticus 17. And Leviticus 17 talks about Israel's seed in many different ways. And one of the ways that it talks about Israel's seed, the children of Israel, that's the worst translation you could ever have. Israel's sons would be better, and it used to be that way. But now they've changed it to the children of Israel. And so we've got ladies thinking that they can be Israel. So many lies that we have learned. Remember, it was only to Israel's seed, Bnei Israel, the Ezra men, that the commandments of Yehovah were given. And they're still being given to only Israel's seed. So you have to ask yourself, does eating clean make you Israel's seed? Some people believe that because they eat clean or because they're trying to follow the feast days, that somehow they're Israel's seed. But in a sense, if they truly were following the feast days, remember it begins with Passover. It's at Passover that the Ger can circumcise themselves. Remember, the Ger were the ones who left the kingdom of their birth and joined themselves to Yehovah's people. It's at Passover that those men can circumcise themselves and all their sons and become as one born in the land. Ezra ha'aretz. That's how a man becomes an Ezra, the children of Israel. It was only to them that Yehovah spoke the Ten Commandments too. And it's only to them that Aaron and Moses are speaking to today. Israel's seed, the Ezra men. He goes on. He says, speak to Israel's seed, saying, these are they put the animals. These are, here's what it actually says. These are the living things which you may eat among the animals, the behemah, that are on the earth. So he's going to start with the living things, but in particularly, he's starting with the animals. 4-footed animals, behemah. That's interesting because behemah is not even, it's not behemoth. You would think it would be animals, behemoth. Eat among all the animal is really what it says, the animal that are on the earth. That's so weird. I had a note here that I wanted to read also. Well, in a sense, I've kind of covered some of this. Let me read my note. I just want to reinforce it with you. I'm not going to read this one. We're going to get that in the next verse. But here, this is Leviticus 20, 1 and 2, and then 25 and 26. It says, then Yehovah spoke to Moses again. You shall say to Israel's seed, this is an older translation in my notes. When I was just coming in, I started changing it to, it's from children of Israel to sons of Israel. Now I've progressed even further and understand it as the Ezra men, Israel's seed. Spiritual men, multi-generations of spiritual men is what Israel's seed is. And that's what B'nai Israel is all about. Whoever of Israel's seed, I have it there too, or the strangers, the Gerim, who dwell in Israel. Remember I said, the man who's a Gerim comes from your kingdom of your birth. They leave that kingdom and they come into Yehovah's kingdom. You shall therefore distinguish between clean animals and unclean, between unclean birds. There, Leviticus 20 is the other one that I was talking about. I knew there was another chapter that talked about unclean animals. Between unclean birds and clean. And you shall not make yourself abominable by beast or bird or any kind of living thing. There's the living thing that we were talking about that creeps on the ground, which I have separated from you as unclean. And you shall be holy to me, for I, Yehovah, am holy, and have separated you from the peoples that you should be mine. Yes, he separated us from America, France, South Africa, all those places. Now we're dwelling in his kingdom. This is who Yehovah is speaking to. Here he goes on again. Clean and unclean. This is my notes. Clean and unclean food. Tahor and tamei food. That's the word. Clean is tahor. Unclean is tamei. Has nothing to do with being washed or being dirty. At least as most understand it in the physical sense. Instead, tahor and tamei represent two realms or states of being before the Creator. Oh, this is so good. Listen to this. things that belong to the realm of tamei are not acceptable or useful in being in the image of Yehovah. This is why I say the books of this world want to lead us in a way that it is opposite of what Yehovah tells us we are to live. By learning to make these distinctions, we determine our orientation towards Yehovah and our eternal destiny. Did you hear what I'm saying? We've got to become Israel if we want to live eternally. Spiritual Israel. I'm not talking about going to the dang state of Israel. That's a deep state hangout right now, bought by the Rothschilds. When we fail to make these distinctions and transgress Yehovah's statutes, judgments, and commandments, we become tamei, unclean. By failing to keep the Torah, whether by adding to its teachings or subtracting from them, or merely failing to live by them, we manifest a distorted image in the earth. Saying we are his and failing to keep his ways is taking his name in vain. And that has very serious consequences. We can't do that. We can't say we're his and do things that do not belong to him. We're putting a false light in the world. What is this last verse here? This is from Hebrews. You know, I don't do much from the New Testament, but I really like what this said. Listen for it. For if we sin willfully, after we have received the knowledge of the truth, there is no longer remains a slaughter, a sacrifice for sins, a slaughter for sins, but a certain fearful expectation of judgment and fiery indignation, which will devour the adversaries. Anyone who has rejected Moses' law dies without mercy. Yes, that's right. On the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. Of how much worse punishment do you suppose will he be thought worthy who has trampled the sons of God, the Bnei Israel, underfoot, counted the blood of the covenant? What is that? That's the Passover sacrifice by which he was sanctified, a common thing, and insulted the Spirit of grace. For we know him who said, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says Yehovah. And again, Yehovah will judge his people. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living Elohim, living lawmaker and judge, the living lawmaker and judge. But when we fail to keep the Torah, we are guilty of distorting and desecrating the image of Yehovah in the eyes of the world. That is what Nadab and Abihu, remember they brought strange fire, when they brought strange fire before Yehovah. Understanding the difference between tahor and tamei will allow us, men we're talking about, to approach Yehovah safely. I want to show you what my blog says. Look at this is the main thing. We are Israel, those who manifest Yehovah's kingdom on the earth. It's about manifesting Yehovah's kingdom on the earth, being a light in the darkness. That's our job. And we can't do it if we're eating bacon. We're going to see what Yehovah thinks about those who eat bacon, who eat unclean broths. Clam chowder. All those kinds of things. Let me go back. 2. So we were talking about living things. They translate it as animals both times, but it's not even the same word. This is behema, the bottom one, which is basically 4-footed animals. But here we're talking about living things. This word is this word here. Oh, you can't see it. Let me see if I can bring it down a little bit. You'll be able to see it now. Okay. To life, lakayim. That's where it is. Kai. Living things. We're going to start with the first living thing that we're going to talk about is the behema. And that's where our next verse is coming from. It says, among the behema. I wonder if that even says plural. To me, it's funny to me that it doesn't use a behema. Oh, it's there. Oh, no, that's not it. Whoever. Oh, beast. Here it is. Behema. Yeah, they wrote it different than the way it's done here. They started with whatever divides the hoof, having cloven hooves, and chewing the cud that you may eat among the animals. That's how it actually says it in the Hebrew. Nevertheless, these you shall not eat among those that chew the cud, or those who have cloven hooves. It says or, not and, or. Those who have cloven hooves is unclean to you. I think it's interesting that Yehovah has spent more time talking about what we're not supposed to eat than what we are supposed to eat. Here on my blog, here's it is. These are clean animals. It's still under the same tab. There it is, clean food. Peter's dream. I don't know if we're going to talk about Peter's dream tonight or today, but we should, because, he had a dream that all these animals, dirty animals, came down to him, and Yehovah said, they're all clean. And the Christian church, of course, wants to interpret it that now we can eat unclean things, don't you know? But he wasn't talking about food. He was talking about people. He was talking about the Gentiles who were come to talk with him about Yehovah's kingdom. We just don't read it far enough, and we take it out of context. But I've gone into it in depth there so that you can see it. Among the animals, we had that. Did I have a note on that? I guess I don't have a note on that. I thought I did. Let's just ditch that then. Don't have a note on that. Oh, Michael. What did you do? Okay, good. We're good now. Nevertheless, these you shall not eat among those that chew the cud, or those that have cloven hooves. The camel, because it chews the cud, but does not have cloven hooves, it is unclean to you. It's got multiple stomachs, but it doesn't have a cloven hoof. It's got to have both to be clean. And here's my note on the right-hand side, which I'll read. Clean food and unclean foods. Tahor and tamei have nothing to do with foods being washed. Instead, tahor, this is the same note that I read in the beginning, isn't it? Eternal destiny. Here is a note that Yehovah told Moses to tell Aaron and his sons. This was the same day that Nadab and Abihu died. It makes me think, was it possible that they were also drunk on that day? I don't know. They certainly weren't acting wisely. He says, do not drink wine or intoxicating drink. You are your sons with you when you go into the tabernacle of meeting, lest you die. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations that you may distinguish between the holy, here it is, HaKodesh, has the ha in front of it. You don't see it on the definition, and the profane. Hakol. Hakol. Between, look what it says, the tahor, the clean, and tamei, the unclean. Thus you shall separate Israel's seed from their uncleanliness, that they die not in their uncleanliness when they defile my tabernacle that is among you. Being unclean, even it's because you touched an unclean woman, and you're unclean for the day until you shower. You can't go into Yehovah's tabernacle. You risk, what does it talk about? You risk dying. What did you just say? They die not in their uncleanness, and when they defile my tabernacle that is among you. Do we want to walk closer with Yehovah? As we learn and begin to walk in his statutes and ordinances, we remove the stumbling blocks and the barriers that interfere and weaken our connection with the Creator. While at the same time, we more fully manifest his image in the world. Isn't that our job? Oh, and isn't that our job? It's the life. It's what life is all about. Why do I exist? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Why am I here? I think it has to do with having the opportunity to choose to live according to the Creator's statutes, judgments, and ordinances. If you won't, why would he want you there for an eternity? Why would you want to be there for an eternity if you're not going to follow Yehovah's ways? So in a sense, this life, I think, is a test. We are now conducting a test of the emergency broadcast system. This is the big test. Will you learn Yehovah's ways, men? Ladies, will you follow your men? That's the question. Let me finish it. It says, by manifesting Yehovah's image and kingdom in the earth for all to see, we become his light shining in the darkness. So he talked about camel hoofs. Here he's talking about the rock hyrax. I don't know what the rock hyrax is, because it chews its cud. It's got multiple stomachs, but does not have cloven hooves. It is unclean to you. The hare, the rabbit, because it chews its cud but does not have cloven hooves, it is unclean to you. And the swine, pigs, though it divides its hoof, having cloven hooves, yet does not chew its cud, it is unclean to you. Their flesh you shall not eat, and their carcasses you shall not touch. Oh, in a sense, this is what it's saying. Their flesh you shall not eat, much less touch it, or even touch it. You could say it that way. They are unclean to you. Yet again, it's always promoted in the movies, isn't it? In the books. Now he's going to those things that dwell in water. Not in the water, it just says in water. In water, it says it both times. In water. In yamim. These you may eat of all that are in water. Whatever in water has fins and scales, whether in the seas or the rivers, you may eat. I would think in the ponds would also be included in that, but they're not, dare I say, living waters. They're kind of captured waters. Maybe Yehovah makes a difference in that. I don't know. But he specifically says seas or rivers that you may eat. But all in the seas or in the rivers that do not have fins and scales, all that move in the waters, or any living thing, there's the kayim again, any living thing which is in the waters, they are an abomination to you. Are they an abomination to you? I would say for many people, they're a delicacy. How many people eat things like eels, clams, mollusks? Well, here I've got on my list unclean foods. Always when on these writings, I have a list to try to help us. I mean, it's not inclusive or exclusive for anything, but it has clean ones and it has unclean ones. Unclean catfish, catfish, that's something in the South. That's like a delicacy, isn't it? Eel, shark, swordfish, clams, crab, krill, lobster, mussels, oysters, scallops, shrimp. Oh, I used to love that stuff. I won't touch it now. Yeah, there's so many things that, and they're always the things that are talked about in our books, in our movies. There's a reason for that. They want you to follow another Elohim, the Elohim of the dead, Satan. But all in the seas or in the river. Oh, we're talking about an abomination. Here's abomination. It's shekets, filth. Here it is right here. Filthy, a dirty, detestable thing. This is a word study. Look what it says. A masculine noun meaning a detestation and abomination and a detestable thing. Chiefly, look what they put. Chiefly, this word marks things that were ceremonially unclean. You know what? When you read your definitions or your interpretations of verses. Oh, I know. Who was it? Betty. You were just talking about the group that you were in, how they always go back to what this man has to say. And this is, look, they're talking about being ceremonial. What does he talk about ceremonial unclean? He simply says things that were unclean and forbidden. If I could have put a line through it, I would. I just grayed it out and made it, what's the word for that? Italics. So that I could remember to talk about this and point it out to you that you can't trust these commentators. They have their own agenda. And, most of them, they have no clue about what an Ezra man is. Becoming an Ezra Haaretz. An Ezra on the earth. They don't know. They don't know anything about it. But this is an abomination. If it's an abomination, it should be an abomination to us. It says they're an abomination to you. Certainly they're an abomination to Yehovah. Next verse, number 11. They shall be an abomination to you. You shall not eat their flesh, but you shall regard their carcasses as an abomination. There it is. Twice they're using the same word. Whatever's in the water. Whatever in water does not have fins or scales, that shall be an abomination to you. And these you shall regard as an abomination among the birds. So now we're moving to the birds. We've got a note for that as well. And we've got the unclean ones and the clean ones and the unclean ones. Now, I put in chicken. There are a lot of people out there who think that a chicken is an unclean bird. I don't think it falls into the categories. And Yehovah doesn't list each bird individually. He lists kinds of birds. So let's take a look at that. He says, and these you shall regard as an abomination among the birds. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination. The eagle, the vulture, the buzzard, the kite, the falcon after its kind, the raven after its kind. So the eagle has kind of their own gender, the vulture his own, buzzard his own, but now we're talking about falcon after his kind, raven after its kind, ostrich or short-eared owl, the seagull, and the hawk after its kind. Hawk after its kind, there we are, off 17. The little owl, the fisher owl, the screech owl, the white owl, the jackdaw, and the carrion vulture, the stork, the heron after its kind, and the hoopie, and the bat. Oh, that was it. That's all he's got to say about birds. So he's got some listed specifically, and he's got some after their kind. I think chicken does not fall into this list. That's my personal opinion. You're going to have to decide for yourself. Someday, if Yehovah gives me more lights on this subject, I'll stop eating chicken. I'll stop growing chicken. Till then, I'm going to eat what chicken I grow. I don't buy it from the store. I don't buy any meat from the store, just so you know. I don't. Look at nowadays. Oh my gosh. We're seeing nanobots injected into our meats. We're seeing vaccine injected into our meats or into the cows that are coming to our meats. You know, there's a reason Yehovah gave us Leviticus chapter 17. We'll talk about it when we get there. It's just a few weeks, well, a couple months away, I guess. We're on 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Yeah, almost 2 months away. Flying insects. Oh, this is really an interesting one. Again, here's my notes. Clean insects. What are they? I go through a lot on this because he gives us some things four-footed. They got to be four-footed. What insect is four-footed? Name an insect that has 4 feet. It doesn't happen. But here we have our list. Come on. Oh, we don't even have it. Clean birds. Locust, locust, locust. Unclean, everything else. What do they want you to do? Eat bugs. Do you see what they're doing? They want to defile you at every turn in your life. They want you to do the opposite of what Yehovah requires of his people. Eat bugs. They're not talking about locusts. All flying insects that creep on all 4s shall be an abomination to you. Oh, that sounds pretty inclusive, doesn't it? 4s, all 4s. This is, it says common noun meaning 4, used as an ordinal number. It means 4th. I don't think that's how it's being used. I think I talk about it more in my writings, but we're talking about going around crawling on, as we would do on all 4s. It's talking about an insect crawling on all 4s on the earth. He says, yet, these you may eat of every flying insect that creeps on the earth on all 4s, those which have jointed legs above their feet, of which it may leap on the earth. These you may eat. So let's talk about this one first. Different translations help to give us and clarify our understandings. Creep on all 4s. Here's the word creep. It is this word here, shoretz, not shakatz. That's a different word than abomination. This happens to be shoretz. And then we have, shoretz. Oh, that also has the idea of it. It's swarming. It swarms. Creeps. No, it swarms. Oh, that's very interesting. And then here's all fours. Again, second form, masculine form, four, number 4 is what it looks like. All you may eat. So here's what's that like? Do I have it here? Yeah, here it is. A literal translation of the Holy Bible. They said, only this you may eat of any swarming thing which flies. Swarming thing which flies. Oh, that's a really good way of saying it. Which goes on all fours, which has legs above its feet to leap with them on the earth. Here's the modern King James Version. Yet you may eat these things. You may eat of these things. Yet you may eat these of any flying, swarming thing that goes on all fours. Those which have legs above their feet and leap on the earth. Here's my translation. Yet you may eat these, any flying, swarming insect that crawls, which have above their feet legs jointed to leap upon the earth. Here's charrettes. We're talking about charrettes, swarming, jumping. Goes on all fours. I put yes, 4 as a number. What is wrong with this? No insects have 4 legs. So let's go deeper. Here's the root of this word 4, see, is 7251. Here's 7251. Says to go down on hands and knees in a sense of being on all fours. That's what Yehovah is talking about. He's talking about things that crawl on the earth. And I already gave you my definition. So here's the last thing. We're talking about grasshoppers. I mean, if you take a look, I'm going to look at this again. I guess we're going to see it in the next verse. So maybe I'll go ahead and read this. Green grasshoppers and brown locusts are close cousins, both in the grasshopper family. Well, grasshoppers hop like mad and can be abundant and pesky. Locusts can fly. More significant, locusts have the unusual ability to be total loners or to enter what the scientists euphorically call a gregarious state. This is the flying and swarming stage, the stuff of biblical proportions. This is what we're talking about. So now let's go to the next verse. He says, these you may eat. Locust, after its kind. The destroying locusts, after its kind. The cricket, the grasshopper, after its kind. Is that what Yehovah said? You've got to go deeper. I put little agreement among the translators. There's little agreement among the translators. Here's one of the worst. This is King James. Look what it says. Locust, bald locust, beetle, and grasshopper. Does a beetle have legs that allow it to leap on the earth? Does it swarm anywhere but in the movies? Many translations say grasshopper, cricket, katydids, in addition to the locusts. But grasshoppers, crickets, katydids, while they have wings, are not flyers. Their wings are more for sound. And when was the last time anyone dreaded a swarm of katydids or crickets? No, we don't dread that, do we? So we have basically 4 kinds of animals: arba, salam, chargol, and kargav. And here they are: locust. Locust, locust, locust. We can eat locust. These are the kinds of locusts that we can eat. And some translations do a pretty good job. Look at this as the Urban's Bible. Swarming locust, devouring locust, charcoal locust, and karav locust, after its kind. I think they went with kind of the Hebrew word, but understood that the Hebrew word was locust. Here is Rotherham. These of them may ye eat. The swarming locust after its kind, the devouring locust after its kind, the cargo locust after its kind, and the kargav locust after its kind. Yes, this is what we're talking about. Look at Yasher says. This is interesting. And Yehovah said, was like the ninth plague, eighth plague, I guess. I don't remember, 7 maybe. And Yehovah sent and brought numerous locusts into Egypt. Kessel, Shalom, Chargol, and Karab. They put Cargol, translated it differently or transliterated it differently. Locust, each of its kind, which devoured all of the hail had left, all that the hail had left remaining. So after the hail came, the stuff was on the ground, and now, before the people could even get to it, the locusts are going to clean it up. And the Egyptians rejoiced at the locusts. Oh, good, we can eat them. They knew. This is Egypt, and they even knew you could eat locusts. In fact, I've got some recipes on eating locusts at the end of that particular chapter on clean flying insects, locusts. The Egyptians rejoiced at the locusts, although they consumed the produce of the field, and they caught them in abundance and salted them for food. And Yehovah turned a mighty wind of the sea, which took away all the locusts, even those that were salted, and thrust them into the Red Sea. Not one locust remained within the boundaries of Egypt. Oh, so interesting. I love Yasher. It gives us so much more light in the darkness. Next verse. But all other flying insects which have 4 feet, which crawl on the earth, shall be an abomination to you. By these you shall become unclean. Whoever touches the carcass. Now, when he says these, he's talking about all the things that are above. The behemoth, the birds, the fish, and the bugs. By these, you shall be unclean. Oh, yeah, there it is. These are all the unclean animals listed above. Whoever touches the carcass of any of them shall be unclean until evening. If we touch a dead insect, we're unclean until evening. Wow. You know, I used to hit flies with the fly swatter. We were just talking about that right now. It's December currently, almost January of 25. And we have no insects right now. I've got my window open right now. It's still hot. We're in North Carolina. But I can remember many times killing a fly with the fly swatter, taking the fly and flicking it onto the fly swatter so I could just pop it down the drain. Should have probably put it in the garbage instead, because of what we're going to read right now. Whoever carries part of the carcass of any of them shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. This is just touching a dead animal, a dead insect. Right now. I'm talking, as you can see it going on and off. It just did it again. Okay, well, you're not having any complaints, so I'm going to continue. Whoever carries any part of the carcass of any of them shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. The carcass of an animal, now we're talking about a behemoth, which divides the foot, but is not cloven hoofed or does not chew the cud, is unclean to you. Everyone who touches it shall be unclean. And again, we're talking about camels, pigs, those kind of things. Dogs are four-footed, but they don't have cloven hooves or multiple stomachs, do they? Whatever goes on its paws. Oh, here they're talking about paws right here. And whatever goes on its paws among all kinds of animals. What's the word they use for animals here? Is it living things or is it behemoth? That is a good question. Goes on beasts. Oh, living things. Living things. It's not saying animals, it's saying living things. Paws. Living things that have paws, in other words. Whatever goes on its paws among all kinds of living things that go on all fours, those are unclean to you. Squirrel is a good example of that. How many people eat squirrel? Eat rabbits. Rabbits have paws. Squirrels have paws. Whatever touches any such carcass shall be unclean until evening. The books love to have them all eating unclean foods. Let's go squirrel hunting. Whatever carries any such carcass shall wash his clothes. Whoever carries any such carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. It is unclean to you. These also shall be unclean to you among the creeping things that creep on the earth. The mole, the mouse, the large lizard after its kind, the gecko, the monitor lizard, the sand reptile, the sand lizard, and the chameleon. These are unclean to you among all that creep. Whatever touches them shall, when they are dead, not when they're living. I know I've caught lizards before. Isn't he cute? He's so cute, just like him. But when they're dead, they shall be unclean. You can't touch them when they're dead. Anything on which any of them falls when they are dead shall be unclean, whether it is an item of wood. So this is things that they're touching. It's going to be unclean. What about unclean flies that touches our stuff? Anything on which any of them falls when they are dead. So you hit the fly with the fly swatter, it falls on your stove. Whether it is any item of wood or clothing or skin or sack, whatever item it is in which any work is done, it must be put in water, I guess with a stove, washed, and it shall be unclean until evening. Then it shall be clean. Any earthen vessel, talking about a jar or a clay jar, that's an earthen vessel. Any earthen vessel in which any of them falls, you shall break. And whatever is in it shall be unclean. So you're not going to eat the food that the insect fell into. In such vessels, any edible food upon which water falls becomes unclean, and any drink that may be drunk from it becomes unclean. So is he saying that if you have a vessel an earthen vessel that you're catching water in, but you found a dead animal in it that you have to, the water's going to be unclean and the vessel has to be broken. That's what it sounds like to me. And everything on which, well, here I have a note. Let's see what my note says. Clay pots that have dead things in them are to be broken. So I question bugs. I mean, I understand a mouse crawled in there and died. But an insect that fell in there, is that what we're talking about, bugs? You know, again, I have a question. I want to know the answers. I don't have all the answers, but I want to know the answers. Inquiring minds want to know. I have an inquiring mind. Don't have the answer, though. And everything on which a part of any such carcass falls shall be unclean. Look what it says. Or a cooking stove. It shall be broken down, for they are unclean and shall be unclean to you. Now, I think we may be able to make a difference between an oven and an oven that's made out of clay. And that may be what we're talking about, should be broken down. And I say that based on something that we're going to read here in just a moment. Nevertheless, a spring or a cistern in which there's plenty of water shall be clean. But whatever touches any such carcass shall become unclean. To me, it says a water source is not polluted by a dead animal. Because it just keeps coming. But we got to get rid of the dead animal. The carcass falls and it becomes unclean. No, that's it says which is be sown in it, it remains clean. A carcass falls on any plantings. Oh, we're done. I'm not done there yet. We're in 36. But whatever touches any such carcass becomes unclean. And if part of any carcass falls on any planting seed, which is sown, it remains clean. But if water is put on the seed, and if a part of any carcass falls on it, it becomes unclean to you. It sounds like you have to be pretty watchful with how your seeds are taken care of. If any animal which you may eat dies, this is a clean animal, he who touches its carcass shall be unclean until evening. So this is not the one that you killed that you're going to eat the meat of. This is if it dies of itself. I'm sure that's what my note has to say. Carcass of a clean animal that dies of itself. Yes. He who eats the carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. Hear this. This is about, it's making you unclean. Only a clean man can appear before Yehovah. This is why he's saying, lest they come into the Ohel Moed, which is kind of the tent of meetings. I think you're talking about the court, because the Gentiles not going, or the Israelite man is not going to go into the tent itself. We have to be clean. We're planning on going to the temple and something happens, or going to the tabernacle and something happens. We ain't going today because we have to wash and be unclean until evening. He who carries its carcass. So we're talking about he who eats the carcass shall wash and be unclean. He who carries the carcass shall be washed, his clothes, and be unclean until evening. And every creeping thing that creeps on the earth shall be an abomination. There it again. Is that the same word that we're using there? Yeah, shakats. Shall be an abomination. It shall not be eaten, whatever crawls on its belly, whether it goes on all fours or whether it has many feet, among all the creeping things. See, well, now that makes it more sense. crawling on all fours. There are no insects that have less than six feet. They all have six. Many have more than six. Now we're talking about more than six. Or whatever has many feet. Among all crawling things that creep on the earth, these you shall not eat, for they are an abomination. They use the word twice. Or now I guess they use the same word again. I'm sure it's the same word. Yeah, it is. You shall not make yourselves abominable. No, you shall not make yourself abominable with any creeping thing that creeps, nor shall you make yourselves unclean with them, lest you be defiled by them. Here's the word defiled that they're talking about. It's a masculine second person. Tamei. Be unclean. No, tamei is clean. What is this? It's defiled. Oh, tamei. Not that's unclean. Foul. Detested. Again, they put that ceremonial business. Ceremonial, like we eat a bug for a ceremony. No, we're just talking about eating unclean foods. It's going to make us unclean. Why didn't they just translate tamei as defiled? Be defiled. Unclean, you'll be made unclean. That's one of the ones that I use this color for, so that I know that they translated it poorly. We're not talking about defiled. We're talking about clean and unclean. You'll be unclean. For I, Yehovah, your Elohim, shall therefore consecrate. For I am Yehovah, your Elohim, is what it says. You shall therefore consecrate yourself. Consecrate yourself. What does that mean, to consecrate ourselves? Pronounce or observe clean, stay clean. It's translated as a point, consecrate. Everything after the dash, where it says ceremonial or morally, everything after that dash is just how other Bibles translate it. The true definition is what comes before that. Clean. Kadash. We men are to consecrate ourselves. As we do, we become holy as he is holy. And isn't that the job? Remember, it's about shining the light of Yehovah in the world for everyone to see. Ladies, you do it by obeying your man. Even if he's asking you to do something wrong, by obeying your man, you are doing what you were created to do. Bone of his bone, flesh of his flesh. The sin is on him, not you. Here's some verses about being holy. This is Peter. But as he who called you is holy, you also be holy in all your conduct. Because it is written, be holy, for I am holy. Where is it written? In the Torah. Yet the New Testament Christians have thrown out all of Yehovah's ways. Here's Leviticus. Consecrate yourselves, therefore, and be holy, for I, Yehovah, your Elohim. For I am Yehovah, your Elohim. But you shall keep my statutes and perform them. I am Yehovah who sanctifies you. By keeping Yehovah's statutes, we maintain our cleanliness. Speak to all the congregation of my son Israel, of Israel's seed, and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, Yehovah, your Elohim, am holy. And the last one, and you shall be holy to me, for I, Yehovah, am holy, and have separated you from the peoples, that you should be mine. I came from the peoples of the U.S. government, and am now Yehovah's. I'm being separated from the people, and I live differently because of that. We're almost done. Just a few more verses. Here is 45. For I am Yehovah who brings you up out of the land of Egypt. Out of the land of Egypt. Could we also look at that? Who actually, he says, brings you up out of the land of Egypt. Where's our Egypt? Where's your Egypt? If you're in France, your Egypt is France. If you're in the United States, your Egypt is the United States. If your Egypt is in Canaan or Babylon, that's where you were born. That's where Yehovah brought us from. But we don't live as a Babylonian. We don't live as the Canaanites. We live as a citizen of an invisible kingdom, Yehovah's kingdom that has its own statutes and judgments and ordinances. And by keeping those, we live by faith. That is what faith is. Living by invisible statutes, judgments, and ordinances. Oh, the word faith has been, oh, I believe. Please, you're killing me. You know, I remember going to a retreat as a teenager, and they wanted to show us what faith was, and they had someone stand up on the stage, and then they had all these catchers underneath them, and that guy had to fall over backwards, and that was faith. That's not faith, folks. That's not what we're talking about. Faith is following the statutes, judgments, and ordinances of an invisible kingdom. That's faith. Nothing more. I am Yehovah who brings you up out of the land of Egypt to be your Elohim, your lawmaker and judge. You shall therefore be holy as I am holy. By keeping his statutes and judgments, as he just talked about here, that's how we stay holy. This is the law of the animals and birds and every living creature that moves in the waters and every creature that creeps on the earth, to distinguish between the unclean and the clean. Here it is. Do I have a note here? That is, between the, here they did it again. This is starting, this is finishing like it started. To distinguish between the unclean and the clean, between the living things that may be eaten and the animals that may not be eaten. So both of these were translated as animals, but they're the living things which may be eaten and the living things which may not be eaten. Remember, up at the beginning, we used this very same word when we were talking about here. These are the living things. There's that word, kayim, or kai, living things, which you may eat among the animals, the behemah. And then they listed the animals. They went into the animals. So this last verse is talking about living things and living things. To distinguish between the unclean and the clean, between the living things that may be eaten and the living things that may not be eaten. All right. Well, that's it for today. Next week, we're going to talk about a woman in childbirth. She becomes unclean, and we're going to find out how she becomes clean again so that she doesn't make her husband unclean. All right. Well, hey, thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Have a great week. This is going to be a great new year that we're moving into. Catch y'all later. Bye now.